Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or morning, wherever we are in the world, and welcome to the webinar, Looking Beyond Electrification, Is Green Hydrogen the Key to a Carbon-Free Future? I'm Lepercq from Royce's Events, working on renewable projects. This is one of several pieces of work we're doing on developments in the global renewable sector. Now, there are over 1,000 of you signed up today, and I can see more attendees flooding in now, which is great to see. Thanks for a brilliant response, and thank you in advance to our panelists for their time. Just a brief bit of housekeeping before we begin. This webinar will last an hour and is being recorded, so we will send you the audio within a week or so. You have the facility to ask questions through the question box. Let's make this highly interactive and do get those questions coming in. Thierry will be moderating the session and can see how many can get through during the hour. The format for this will be Thierry will be doing a short presentation, then on to our panelists for Q&A. As I said, keep those questions coming in. So without further ado, Thierry, please do introduce yourself and begin the session.
Thanks, Luke. It's great to be here on in what is a very loose time for the world of hydrogen. And we are very happy to be able to share this with a panel of experts from around the world. I will be happy to be joined for this session by Laura Nelson. Laura Nelson from the US is Executive Director of the Green Hydrogen Coalition, and she will tell us more about what this coalition is. We have as well Matthieu Crest. Matthieu is a partner at CVA, a consultancy with a great experience across the hydrogen value chain. And then we have López-Brea from Dhamma Energy, a solar developer. He's in charge of their new innovation developments and especially of the hydrogen developments. And on my side, Thierry Lepercq, I'm the founder of Soladvent, a writer of a book, which is Hydrogen is the New Oil. And Soladvent is a developer of mass-scale green hydrogen project. I was previously founder of Soladvent, a solar power company, and executive vice president at NG for 3 years in charge of technology and innovation. We're very happy because this is, we're looking at a sea change whereby hydrogen is moving from a minority, marginal play to being a systemic play. And this is what we're going to try to explain in the next hour. Our title is Beyond Electrification. Electricity, as we all know, is 20% of energy. If we want to replace fossil fuels, we need to replace 100%, and we need to, most importantly, to provide energy security, because this is the most important thing, energy affordability. And the big question now is, can hydrogen deliver that? And that's what we're going to explore. And I have a few slides for you to introduce the discussions and most importantly, Q&A, which we'll have with the participants. I suggest to go through first a review of the announcements. Lots of things have been announced by in Europe, especially in the European Union. Germany and Portugal have announced a number of strategies the last couple of weeks, and what we have, I just picked some numbers. 10 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. That's the announcement of the European Commission. That is momentous. For those who are not fully aware, that's close to 390 terawatt hours. That's close to the power consumption of a country like France. That is a game changer. And the message here is that it's going to be a cornerstone of the European strategy. Just a few weeks earlier, Germany introduced similar measures, and with 37 measures encompassing the whole of the German economy. So that's a first as well, where hydrogen is not just looking at a small segment of the economy, but the whole economy. And other countries like Portugal have made significant announcements. Several billion euros announced just a couple of days ago. If we go through the lessons that we can take from these announcements, they're very, very strong, and they counter a number of ideas that were understood previously to that. First, that hydrogen, there again, as I said, is the key to meet zero objectives. The way it has been presented in each one of those strategies is that hydrogen is central. Hydrogen is not one one part of all of the above. It is central. It is the basis, and we'll get maybe into more details on how it works. Hydrogen should be green. And then the message is very, very clear. If you look at the numbers of the European strategy and the German strategies, it's very clear. There is no gray, blue, or turquoise, whatever the debate is. Green is the way to go. Competitiveness is obviously very, very important objectives. Competitiveness with fossil fuels. This is the target that has been laid out for in those policies. Another very important point as well is that hydrogen is not necessarily a local thing. It has been understood until recently as a minority local thing, which would serve local customers. Here, especially when Germany signs a framework agreement with Morocco, the same day they're announcing their their hydrogen strategies, it sends a very strong message. The hydrogen to Germany is not going to come from Germany or partially. It will come from other places like North Africa or Southern Europe. All sectors also needed. They're far away from just mobility that has concentrated a lot of attention until recently. And last but not least, the midstream side of it is fundamental. And some of the announcements that were made just a couple of days ago on the European hydrogen backbone, and Marcos will tell us a bit more about that, we'll say a number of these things. The big question is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about a fancy thing, expensive things for very wealthy people who can subsidize things, or can it compete with natural gas? And obviously, we'll discuss that with Laura. The situation is different in the US, which has plenty full of natural gas, very low prices. Europe imports natural gas, and the pricing situation is different, obviously more favorable for hydrogen. Here we're focusing on solar, but obviously, why solar? Because solar has already reached the volumes and most importantly the price levels that are needed for hydrogen to be competitive. And that price level, it has to be very clear. It's $15 per megawatt hour. $15, which has now been reached in auctions in Latin America, Southern Europe, and the Middle East, is the threshold when green hydrogen from electrolysis can start competing with fossil fuels at around $1 a kilogram. And obviously those prices, the solar prices keep going down, and the $10 per megawatt hour threshold can be considered before 2030, maybe as early as 2025. Volumes also is an important thing. What we have today is not only the availability of land, etc., but the whole solar value chain getting ready. But all of this is of no use if you don't have electrolyzers, obviously. And today, the electrolysis business is a tiny business, tiny companies. Stock prices have gone through the roof, even though there have been some fallback in the last couple of days. But overall, the stock prices of Nel, McPhy, ITM, who are the three European listed electrolysis companies, have gone up by a factor of 2 or 3 in the last few months. And all these three companies might be small, but they're all targeting gigafactories. And this is really the turning point where we have those companies which share the same vision of becoming world leaders and are planning massive ramp up, which will yield obviously correspondingly very strong falls of the cost of electrolyzers. Matthieu will tell us a bit more about how this is going to happen. There are technologies issues with the bigger stacks, the higher efficiencies. Plant automation is going to be very, very important. And what we're talking about is not just hydrogen generation itself. It's also the midstream side, transmission and storage, which is moving to scale. And Marcos will tell us about this European hydrogen backbone initiative, which is setting a new standard in this regard. Now, if we look at the value chain and where it stands and where the projects are being born right now, I'll get you through first this value chain. Let's think hydrogen as oil and gas, and this is something very important. I'd say culturally, when I mean we, with the people who deal with the hydrogen, many of whom come from the renewable energy world, should forget about renewable energies or partially forget about it. We're talking about a molecule, we're talking about a commodity, we're talking about mass scale. When you talk to oil and gas people, I always like to have this conversation. People tell me, we're doing 100 million barrels a day. How much are you doing? And this is this mindset of being at large scale, which is very important. What is also very important is to see the value chain as something which is coherent and needs to have, there is no, in oil business, there is no downstream without midstream and upstream and vice versa. And in our case, the upstream, which is solar and electrolysis, or wind as well, obviously, let's not forget about wind, can generate that hydrogen. But then again, it doesn't exist without the transmission and storage that will bring that to customers. At the same time, when you look at the downstream side, you see plenty of opportunities. So if I sum up, and this is a list of business models that I was recently asked by an investment bank to lay out for investors the winning business models in this industry, and what is behind each one of those business models, by the way, the actual projects. So we no longer are talking about pilot projects or something ramping up. What we are talking about is a real market with business models and business plans and actual companies aiming at taking very significant market share in this. I'll start with on the upstream side, what we're seeing, and then Marcos will tell us more about what is going on in Spain. But what is very interesting is that you have solar developers, for instance, right now, who which are realizing that the power route, the grid, power grid route is nearly closed, and there's an immense opportunity to develop and own what is basically a permanent oil well. Imagine that you are owning a permanent oil well, and that oil well is zero carbon. This is what a hydrogen, a competitive hydrogen production business can be if you're in Spain, Portugal, or Morocco, for instance, if I take Europe, or if you take the US, in the southwestern US, or in Mexico, which would be equivalent. Electrolyzer gigafactories, I mentioned the fact that those companies' stock prices are going through the roof. Obviously, nothing is going to happen without them. There have huge challenges in front of them for the ramp up. But for those who are going to express and show cost leadership, there is potential to create immense value. And those companies, as I mentioned, in Europe, but also now developing in other geographies in the world, have a great potential. I mentioned hydrogen storage and transmission. Piping is the way to go. It is immensely cheaper to move hydrogen through pipes than it is with trucks or ships. So piping will be by far the preferred option. And on the storage side, salt caverns and other opportunities are there. What we have today is TSOs across Europe, and now increasingly in other places of the world, see their future not just in natural gas, which is phasing out in many countries, but in transforming their pipes to hydrogen and find growth. And ultimately, in these utility businesses, you want to find growth. And if I zoom now on three downstream business models, what is interesting in those three business models, which are concrete cases, is not that these guys want to save the planet. They want to kill competition. They want to be more, to introduce new products which will satisfy their customers. Let's start with the first one, hydrogen-fired power generation. This is something which is totally underestimated, but you know what? You can burn hydrogen, just like as surely as natural gas. The turbine makers, the GEs, the Ansaldos, and the Mitsubishis and Siemens of the world have already product that can accommodate a portion of hydrogen in their turbines and CCGTs. And by 2024, some of them will be ready to go 100%. And Laura will tell us about a great project in Utah, which is doing just that, and which will be able to deliver that highly prized 24/7 fully dispatchable energy power resource that people are after. And the more interesting thing is that you can reuse existing assets. And precisely in the case of Utah, this mountain project that Laura will talk about, we're talking about reusing the existing coal-fired plants, which otherwise would have been decommissioned. So there is a way to transform what is a stranded asset, a worthless thing, into actual gold, something that delivers a fully dispatchable renewable power. That's the first. Second rule that we're talking about, will be more and more talking about, is green ammonia. Green ammonia for fertilizers, not a hugely growing market, to be very frank, but behind that market is another great market, which is just about to I mean, has a huge promise. We're talking about the shipping market. And today, some of the big ammonia producers are contemplating a doubling of the ammonia market, thanks to green ammonia, precisely serving the shipping industry by burning ammonia in shipping engines. And that's another very, very highly promising area. The third area which I would mention as well is steel making. And these, then again, we're talking about concrete examples of retrofitting existing coking coal-based steel mills to hydrogen through direct iron reduction. And this is very, very promising, because the guy who will be able to sell steel, green steel, more or less at the price of brown steel, if I may say, is certain to outfox competition. We'll see that there's nothing about cars and trucks, and obviously cars and trucks offer an interesting opportunity. I'll tell you my personal vision of things. It will come after that. The first thing that we need to do with all these business models is to ramp up the millions of tons of hydrogen at very low cost, which will make it competitive for the fuel cell guys to produce power, to introduce new cars and mobility systems. But that will be a second time. All these guys here are ready to buy, use and buy hundreds of thousands of tons each, and this is where the market is going. So this is up for my presentation. Well, what I suggest is to have from now on two levels of session. The first one is going to be my direct interaction with some of the panel, with the panel members, regarding some of the questions that I raised before that. And obviously, I can see that there are plenty of questions coming, and we'll be very happy to answer your questions. By the way, don't hesitate to ask them. Luke is going to give us and moderate some of those questions and get back to us. But first, Laura, tell us about hydrogen in the U.S., because the U.S. for many people is seen as a pioneer of shale gas, and not necessarily a pioneer of what is going on. Yet California and some other places have established very bold targets of 100% renewables in power. Now the question is how you make that possible. The Los Angeles area has also started a number of interesting initiatives. Can you tell us what is going on there, and how do you see from a US perspective this hydrogen revolution unfolding?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Thierry. It's great to be here. I want to say with all of you here today, and Thierry, that was just an awesome presentation. You know, I look at the question that this panel is up to answering: is green hydrogen the key to a carbon-free energy future? And the answer is solidly yes. And to your point, Thierry, it's critical and fundamental. It will be central to realizing those carbon-free goals, you know, really across the globe. And so I've spent about 25 years in the energy space, and really always focused on clean energy innovation and how we can drive results and create markets. And a lot of that, of course, occurs through regulatory and policy pathways. So I've had a great opportunity to work on many of those pathways. I actually have served as an energy advisor to 2 governors in the United States, in Utah specifically, And in my last service to Governor Herbert here, I had an opportunity to spend a lot of time working on policy pathways for hydrogen. So that's just an indicator that we're seeing a growth, significant growth, and an interest in hydrogen and how states can build that in to realizing their clean energy futures. So today, it's really my honor to serve as the executive director of the Green Hydrogen Coalition. And this is really a unique coalition. We are mission driven, and our mission really is to facilitate all policies and practices that will accelerate deployment and utilization of green hydrogen in every sector where it will result in decarbonization. And as you mentioned, Thierry, it is a multi-sector asset, and I call it an asset because it is the asset that will realize that green, clean energy future, if you will. And our approach at the coalition is unique. We are focused on those commercially scalable projects that can really simultaneously leverage supply and demand to realize our goals. And our first big initiative is the one that you mentioned, Thierry. That's the Intermountain Power Project. It is a project located in Delta, Utah. It historically has been a very large coal plant providing energy predominantly to California. 1,800 megawatt coal facility that is slated to be decommissioned and recommissioned as a combined cycle combustion turbine facility, burning 30% green hydrogen on day one of operation in 2025. Now, I should step back just a second and say, you know, when we say day one of operation, that fully commissioned date, delivering power to the largest municipal utility in the U.S. That's the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. But we fully anticipate that there will be some scaled testing that's going to occur, you know, a year in advance of that. So this is real. It's happening today in the United States, and this is a great project because it combines, Thierry, as you mentioned, that upstream with the downstream, and we've got the midstream. There is a high voltage 2,400 megawatt transmission line already in place there, ready to deliver power. And in fact, that line today delivers power to California, and it already has wind and solar on the line. So we see the potential to grow green hydrogen at this space using electrolytic production that can be combined with another unique asset at this site, which is a large salt dome formation. And those salt domes can be engineered into caverns to store I believe it's 5,500 tons of hydrogen per cavern, and there's potential to build up to 100 caverns at the site. So a really unique project, perhaps, but what we see occurring is that this is going to demonstrate that we can do this. We can bring together the upstream, the downstream, the midstream. It's going to drive down the cost of electrolytic production of hydrogen. I think it will continue to result in declines in the cost of storage overall, even though salt storage for long duration hydrogen storage is most cost effective today. You begin to prove that out, and you're going to see, I think, storage costs declining also. It's a combination project that's going to, I think, propel production and utilization of green hydrogen in the U.S., providing a feedstock across multiple years, and certainly across transportation. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about that because I think that's where we can get to.
Just a quick question, Laura. What you're describing of the intermittent power is basically giant batteries, which is going to store the solar produced from California and they shipped and then. And lots of people are saying we're talking about beyond electrification, and lots of people are saying storage means batteries. Can you tell us about the costing issues and how? I mean, this is a question that lots of people have. What is the relative costing of hydrogen on one side and lithium-ion batteries on the other side? Lots of people are saying lithium-ion is the way to go. Can you sort of give us about some hints about how is it for a few hours or days or weeks, and how does that compare, lithium-ion to hydrogen in the particular case of this intermittent power project?
That's a great question because, you know, we use all types of storage, and we're going to need it all. We're going to need, you know, short duration, midterm, you know, duration if you talk about compressed air energy storage or pumped hydro storage. But when you really look at a week, inter-day shifting across months or weeks or seasons, you're going to need a lot of long duration energy storage. And that's in fact where a project like the IPA project shows up. So these are not my estimates. These are estimates that were provided by Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems. And they do include the cost of solar, but essentially, and I'll just give two kind of data points. If you look at lithium ion for about a 4-hour period, you're probably talking about a 94 megawatt hour levelized cost. If you compare that to green hydrogen, it would be about $122. So certainly the lithium ion battery is the choice. But if you move beyond the 12-hour period, which is the critical period, and certainly by the time you get to 24 hours, lithium ion, because of the loss in round trip efficiency, is going to increase. You're going to be at a position where green hydrogen at $122 levelized cost of energy is more cost effective than over $200 for lithium ion, I think in the $20 range. So it really is about that long duration energy storage, which we're going to require to have reliability and resilience, I'll say, on the system. That's the real game changer here.
Thanks, Laura. I mean, the costing issue is something I'm reviewing some of the questions, and there is some elements of disbelief when we say that hydrogen is going to close into the price of natural gas, and it's true that there are a number of price points which have been given by a number of people, including those organizations that do advocacy for hydrogen, which span, I would say, a wide range. I mean, if we put together the numbers, some people are saying green hydrogen is not is $5 a kilogram, or some even say higher than that. And then so what is exactly the situation, Matthieu? What can you tell us about these things in light?
I think I understood the question. We're talking about costing of hydrogen at different points of the hydrogen value chain, I would say. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, the question is very important because you measure, in fact, the competitiveness, the cost competitiveness of hydrogen at different points of a delivery or a supply chain. And of course, it is not the same to deliver or measure this cost out of the generation step. So after electrolysis, after, for example, conditioning and profile transformation facilities, after storage facilities, exactly like Laura said, for example. So if you mobilize big storage capacities in compressed tanks, or through, for example, geological storage capacities, or even after a pipe, for example, at delivery point, for example, thermal power plants, an industry off-taker, etc. The way you measure this cost is generally the most common used measure is levelized cost of hydrogen. So it's a complete cost which pays the capex, the opex, and of course the WACC of the different facilities. And when you look at the different exercises we did, you arrive at very impressive results for 2025, looking at zones where you have excellent or very competitive renewable feedstocks like solar or wind, if you are able to mix, for example, solar and wind. And after electrolysis, if you have electrolyzers around $300 per kilowatt with the efficiency rate around 60% high heating value, you are around $1.1 per kilo, which is very impressive. And if you go after, of course, and you follow the travel of the molecule until a delivery point, you increase the cost for sure, and you arrive at 1.8, sometimes 2, given the system. So really, the key challenge is to be able to optimize and decrease the cost of this total chain to be able to deliver an affordable molecule with the right volumes and profile, because in fact the question of profile is very, very important.
We have a question here now if we move further downstream about mixing, whether hydrogen should be used as such or mixed, and the question is both for the transmission and storage side and also for turbines. Can you tell us what is the preferred route? What are the technical issues? What are the cost issues behind that?
So in the different modeling and system we studied during our previous project, we compared, in fact, pure H2 routes versus blended routes, leveraging existing assets like, for example, natural gas assets. And you discover that it is quite more, until a certain level or threshold of integration of the H2 within the gas pipes, it is much more economical to follow this route. But then after a given threshold, which is around the 18 to 20% of integration of the molecule per volume unit and per day within the pipes, you face, in fact, very strong issues in terms of refurbishment cost, maintenance cost, inspection costs of your pipes, compression, distribution units, etc. And it's more rational, I would say, to go for a pure H2 system here. But at the beginning, I would say there is a good story of convergence versus between the gas assets and the H2 economy development.
Now, if we move one instance completely further up the value chain is electrolysis, and there are a number of technologies. And the question is, you know, we're talking about these gigafactories. Some people are saying, hey, these companies are quite small. How can a company that has 100 employees can build a gigafactory and then supply gigawatts of electrolyzers quite soon? There are technology issues. What can you tell us about the challenges that need to be overcome and the opportunities there are on this on the electrolysis side, and why is Europe in this case quite well positioned?
So to answer your first question about how to optimize really the electrolysis or the electrolyzer manufacturing business, you have lots of different levers which can be activated and which are already very well identified. So the different electrolyzer OEMs know them, have already optimized and defined new design and have projects on paper or being which are going to be built of optimized factory to optimize this the cost per kilowatt and also the efficiency. One of the most important levers is clearly the size of the stack for the electrolyzer, because this brings a lot of scale economies, particularly on the balance of stack, the balance of land, and the installation cost of an electrolyzer system. So moving from generally you have a 1 mega, 2 megawatt stack until 5 mega, 6 megawatt stack. And here you have some effects which appears, for example, historically in the wind business, for example, where you really reach important scale economies, including on the complete system based on this lever. You have also other kind of levers for sure. One of the most important is being able to optimize the efficiency rate at the electrolyzer system level, because it's a very electro-intensive business for sure. And if you are able to optimize this without impacting the price per kilowatt, it has a very strong impact on the LCOH, so the complete cost of hydrogen.
Thank you, Matthieu. Marcos, none of this exists without plentiful renewable power, and solar in particular. And solar, we're not going to talk too much about solar, but solar has developed very, very strongly. It was a 100 gigawatt market last year. Spain is an interesting case because it was the first market for solar when it was highly subsidized 12 years ago. It was non-existent, and then suddenly it popped up last year with PPAs, and now it's facing a new challenge. There are a number of developers who are facing a new era where after all the solar power market is no longer as easy as. Can you describe a bit the solar situation and how much and why is it an opportunity for hydrogen, and vice versa? Why is hydrogen an opportunity for solar developers?
Thank you, Thierry. Merci for l'invitation. Thank you for inviting me to this conference, and thank you for sharing all your ideas. Well, just a few words about solar situation in Spain. There's, as you said, Thierry, it was one of the first market, and I think we had even #1 position in the world in wind and maybe also in solar for some time. But then we entered into a period where almost no megawatt was installed due to, let's say, remuneration in the feed-in tariff schemes that we had in Spain, mainly for wind, for solar PV, and for CSP, for concentrated solar power, for thermosolar. After that period, we entered into a new area where a lot of projects were presented to the ministry to obtain the connection point. We have in Spain 105 gigawatt total installed capacity in the electricity system, including nuclear, CCGTs, wind, hydro, solar PV, etc. Projects received by the ministry, including not only wind and solar, but also some biomass plants and CSP, are doubling this capacity. So something around 220 gigawatts, depending on the figures, if they're provided by the transmission system operated by the Eléctrica de España or by the market commission. So doubling this capacity is almost no sense. Just for information, peak demand in Spain for electricity at the maximum has been 45 gigawatts. So this huge amount of projects have been suffering like a kind of a demand and interest from developers. The real thing is that a non-negligible number of them do not have all the permits and all the, let's say, what they need to be really accomplished and commissioned. That's an important fact to be aware of. So that said, hydrogen is a solution that can bring the assets that do not obtain grid connection, access to the electricity grid, another option to provide an output and energy for other industrial mobility uses. I would say that in any country, we should assess some variables, 3-4 variables. First one is, where can we obtain wind and solar resource? Where are these locations? Second is, how far or how close are we from the electricity grid and to the gas grid? And the third variable is, how close or how far are we from the consumption points? That is creating a big interest in Spain right now, not only by big utilities like Iberdrola or some other, let's say, or trying to transition to just oil companies to energy companies like Repsol, for example, but also from medium-sized developers like Dhamma Energy or Sonetics and Capital Energy, some companies that are really quick and fast-moving for the permitting and getting projects that could comply with these 3 variables: locations for the resource, solar, wind, connection to the grid or electricity, and the consumption point. So solar situation, as the recap, is being like transitioning. A month ago, last news is that the ministry does not accept any more projects. And for those projects that have been submitted already, they can obtain back their guarantees in 3 months time. So that's up to September the 20th. And those projects that wish to continue the permitting process, the due dates for obtaining the administrative authorization, the environmental impact assessment authorization, they get like more tight deadlines. So that is going to give more certainty to investors and more certainty to the real projects that are really going to be commissioned.
We previously worked with a gas TSO, and so you have this double experience, and we have a lot of questions regarding how the gas grid, as it is, can withstand hydrogen, and whether obviously the molecule. I mean, there is issues about the size of the molecules, the capacity of the pipes to withstand the stress. Also, a question which is fair question around the fact that the volume I mean, the energy content of hydrogen volume is 1/3 of that of natural gas. How do you see this impacting the gas grid, and I would include to that the transmission, but also storage? And what do you see as is it feasible? Is it challenging? And then maybe say a few words, if you could tell us a few words about this interesting initiative, which was just launched a few days ago on this European hydrogen backbone.
Sure.
Right. That's your source.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's a challenging thing, and there's a lot of research and development right now, and different testing for different type of pipelines. It's not evident, as you might know, biomethane is 100% exchangeable with natural gas, so which means that you can completely remove natural gas from pipelines and replace it by biomethane. But it's not the same case with hydrogen, because with hydrogen we have to deal with the operating pressures, with the pipeline diameters, with the existing compression system designs, and some other like characteristics of hydrogen, like the embrittlement and some other variables. Of course, what is the end use of hydrogen? It's different to use hydrogen for a refinery, where you don't need such a high purity hydrogen, or if you need hydrogen for a fuel cell, for a truck, or for a bus, or for a car. Existing gas pipelines are called to play a major role in this in the transport of hydrogen. And there've been projects in the UK, in France, in Spain, in the Netherlands, where already up to 20% of hydrogen has been mixed with methane, showing that up to 20% is feasible. I would say regulation in each of the countries is different, but there's a lot of ongoing happening right now to show that more and more hydrogen is, let's say, accepted or acceptable by the gas pipelines. And I would say that these infrastructures, they are already built. Some of them, they are already, the investment has already been, let's say, recovered, or however you can explain that. So it is possible to use this infrastructure. There is a big thing with the compression, even though some reports say that it's only 2% of the total cost of the energy used by for the compression the hydrogen. But I would say that the first, in my opinion, the criteria should be, okay, let's install the electrolyzer as close as possible to the consumption. That's if it's possible, and if it's not possible, let's try to find locations where I'm closer to the gas grid and transport this to the pipelines, and transport it to regions where there's a demand for that. There are a lot of projects. There's one in Spain, led by the Fundación del Hidrógeno de Aragón. That's in the, would say, the north, close to Zaragoza region. That's the Zaragoza region called HIGS. That's hydrogen injection into the gas grids, where there are several bodies from Germany and Switzerland and Spain and some others working on the admixtures accepted by the gas pipelines. And companies in this project that you mentioned, the backbone, like Gazuni, Terega, and Enagas, are working on creating and connecting the hydrogen valleys, what are known as the hydrogen valleys. But this project is, again, saying that 75% of these pipelines should be existing pipelines. So let's use existing pipelines as a way to transport the energy. And it is considered that around 0.09 to 0.17 euros per kilogram of hydrogen, the cost that is, linked to the transport by pipelines, which compared to trucks is a very much lower cost. So I think pipelines, gas pipelines, existing pipelines have a major role to play to transport hydrogen from regions as Spain, where we can produce more hydrogen at a lower cost due to the solar and wind resource, to regions where there is a demand and this solar and wind resources is less.
Thank you, Marco. Laura, we have a lot of questions regarding, a lot of curiosity about the US, and also people are also especially curious about the business model, and we'll get into that thing, how you structure and finance this project, because if you get to ultimately very low prices, natural gas in the US is very hard to beat. Can you tell us a bit why the initiatives that are being taken, for instance, in Los Angeles, or with CCAs, the so-called the consumer choice aggregators in the US, and why is hydrogen to find its way to the market, even though there again it's going to be very tough to compete on a price level with natural gas?
Yeah, great question. I mean, natural gas is very cheap in the U.S., and as we've heard a lot here, you know, the cost effectiveness of green hydrogen really is locationally dependent. I think, you know, we've got a couple of factors here in the U.S. That are driving green hydrogen production and can push us towards a competitive price point, $2 a kg, getting close to, you know, $1.50 over time, you know, maybe in the next 10 to 15 years or sooner. And one of those, certainly similar to Europe, is the significant decline in the cost of solar energy. I mean, today in the California market, we have significant curtailment of solar, and much of that is uneconomic curtailment. So if we can take that very, very low cost, no cost renewable energy and place to green, and then that's going to be a driver, I think, for demand and production of green hydrogen. The other important piece of this certainly is, and I guess I want to mention, I mean, we just saw in Arizona here a solar and battery project outbid a combined cycle combustion natural gas turbine. So that's the future. That's where we're going. And so green hydrogen, I think, is part of that renewable long duration energy storage solution that's going to be required on the system, driven by these policies that are pushing us to 100% renewable energy, clean energy, really across the United States. And it's coast to coast, it's East Coast to West Coast, whether you're looking at New York or California. And certainly California is providing a lot of leadership in this space. If you take LA specifically, and the LA 100 goal to be at 100% clean energy by 2045. And I think a lot of conversations occur around, you know, how do you can get to the 80, maybe even 90% with pretty easily and pretty cost effectively, but it's really that last 10% push that's so difficult. And so as we move into that space of 100% clean energy, renewable energy, it's really green hydrogen that's going to be the driver for meeting those goals and the timeframes that are identified. For LA, it's 2045. And in fact, the Intermountain Power Plant, which we discussed, I mentioned that it's going to be 30% green hydrogen on day one it's commissioned, but the goal is to reach 100% by 2025 or sooner.
Great. Matthieu, we have questions regarding warranties and bankabilities, especially on the electrolyzer side. People are saying, these things need to work for decades. Who's going to stand for it? Who's going to stand for the guarantees that need to be given? How do you think financings ultimately can be built and investors can trust the fact that these installations, especially on the upstream side, the electrolyzers I'm talking about, certainly maybe as well, some of the midstream, how do you see as the challenges and the opportunities to solve this issue of bankability?
So it's a very important question here and a very difficult one. Has some of the participants? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So as some of the participants noticed, it's there is a chicken and egg question and a very difficult one, because to ensure hydrogen rises as an important or a mass scale energy vector, you need to organize a complete system, from linking, in fact, different modules or steps of businesses or players within this system. The upstream part, so you need to together, in fact, link renewable electricity production with electrolyzer O&Ms at the right scale to ensure, in fact, their gigafactories project means something, with electrolysis chain, with the right midstream model, and with very important off-takers, bankable ones, allowing, in fact, to provide the first levels of volumes and usage. And from that, you can, of course, expand and develop the usages of the molecule, including on less important or more, I would say, mass market usages, for example, like for mobility. And in fact, linking really this system into through, for example, consortium models, or for example, mutualized offtake contracts would allow probably to improve the bankability of the system, giving perspective of volumes and allowing the full green H2 chain to be more bankable, in fact, at the right scale. So there is a question of aggregating really a level of demand takers to kickstart such a story, I would say.
Marcos, there's a thing that we haven't talked about, and we have a question regarding that. People think that, especially those areas where you have a lot of sunshine in Spain, and that would be the case in Morocco. What about water? Where do you get the water from? How much water do we need, and where would you get will we get the water for hydrogen projects in Spain?
Well, I think there's water enough for the project, then that's not an issue. Spain is, well, in the past, not in the past years, but some time ago, we used to have some problems with desert areas, but fortunately, these problems are not like current problems. So there's all the projects that have been involved in the water problem was not an issue at all. If I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the needed 9 liters per kilogram. Is that correct? I think that's the right number, something like that. So, and as you know, of course, when you use for a fuel cell, you give back the water as a water vapor. So it's a kind of circular way. So that's not an issue in Spain. I've also heard that using, of course, water from the grid, the water grid, that's of course feasible, and the way it's done in the projects that have been developed in Spain that are under development right now. But I also read somewhere some projects, not in Spain but elsewhere, using seawater that they get I'm not sure about that last point. Maybe some of you could clarify. But I was interested about that last point, if seawater is possible.
Thanks. Another question, by the way, regarding Spain. Lots of people are. I mean, there's one. We have one question regarding. We have a gentleman who was involved in Desertec. By the way, I salute him. We worked on that 15 years ago. Desertec was this amazing initiative of massive solar power generation across the Mediterranean. Now there are pipes crossing the Mediterranean. Can you tell us about what are those pipes which connect, for instance, Spain and Morocco and Algeria, and same thing, by the way, Tunisia and Italy that used?
You're speaking, Thierry, about the gas pipelines? Yeah, so that we got
between North Africa and Europe.
Yeah, we got the Maghreb pipeline and the Medgas. Both connecting to Europe through Italy and through south of Spain, crossing from Algeria through Morocco, and paying the way in Morocco in the form of gas. And that's one of the let's say main ways of supplying gas to Spain. But we do also have a lot of LNG coming to Spain through regasification plants in several parts of our country. So we are both using, let's say, gas from Algeria coming from Medgas and from the Maghreb gasoduct, but also we have a lot of LNG coming with vessels in form of liquid gas, and then that is being regasified at the regasification plants.
Matthieu, we have several questions regarding ammonia. Ammonia as a vector, ammonia, we haven't talked too much about shipping, but obviously the issue of if you want to transmit hydrogen for long distances, for instance, if you're in Japan, you want ammonia you want hydrogen from Australia or the Middle East, it's going to be difficult to have pipes between the two. So can you tell us what are the issues behind ammonia? What are the pros and cons?
So the pros, ammonia is a very, very good chemical carrier of H2. In fact, if you remember, the issue with transporting and logistics of hydrogen is the density, the volumic density of H2. It's not very good. It is a very good energy. It has a very good energy content per mass unit, but it's not very dense in terms of volume. So it's quite difficult to transport it. And ammonia would allow, in fact, to improve a lot versus compression and even versus liquefaction of H2 to improve a lot this volumic density. So would reach, with a lot to reach very important scales economy if you have to develop H2 supply chain on long distance. So when you think about pipes, you think about compression. We could go probably also on ammonia for such mesosystems of logistics. But when you really want to go, I don't know, transatlantic, for example, system, or if you think about future H2 hubs, leveraging Atacama deserts or Australia or Middle East solar resources to provide green H2 to Japan, for example, here you need probably a much more powerful chemical carrier, and ammonia is very well indicated. And today, in fact, the shipping and the trading of such of ammonia is very well mastered and demonstrated. So that's why it's probably it will have a place, in fact, in the midstream of H2 for sure, long distance.
Laura, all of this is going to require considerable investment. We're talking about capital investment, upstream, midstream, downstream, and the question is who's going to put in the money? Do you see, and obviously you have the U.S. approach, but I guess that's also could be valuable in other geographies. Do you see the government coming with things? Do you see investors? Do you see industrial companies like natural gas transmission operator? Do you see users putting the money? Is this equity, debt? I mean, it's a complex issue. Where do you see as should be the sources of money, and who will contribute the bulk of it? What's your perception of it?
Well, you know, I think a lot of it is actually going to be driven by private investment. And I think each entity will make its decision about the appropriate allocation across debt and equity. We do have opportunities in the U.S. to secure federal debt. You may remember, we'll call it a famous project in the U.S., Solyndra, which was a large solar project, $550 million, that was secured by U.S. debt. And while people recognize that that project wasn't a success, I think what it did demonstrate is the success of having long-term secured loans that can be provided by the government. Now, that may be a pathway. It isn't the pathway that's being pursued at the IPP facility. So in fact, this is equivalent of about a 1.9 billion, I think, all-in project. The actual recommissioning from a coal plant to a natural gas plant is in the neighborhood of 900 million, I think, just below that. So you're looking at the all-encompassing electrolytic production, storage, the transmission, the recommissioning of the facility is about $1.9 billion, and that has to be made palatable to ratepayers who ultimately are going to be paying the cost for the power at the other end. And so I think that what we have here is a situation where, in fact, Mitsubishi Hitachi Power Systems has partnered with a local company to do a joint venture around the storage and possibly the electrolytic production. Mitsubishi has been awarded a contract for the generator at the site. And so the commercial arrangements are playing out between the parties that are involved here. And it is a unique situation because you have the upstream, midstream, and offtake all united around the same cause. So I think there are going to be locationally specific considerations as we scale up. And I will say that I think policy and defining the full benefits of green hydrogen are going to be critical in the U.S. for expansion, because right now, as you mentioned, Thierry, it is a more expensive option, but we're not accounting for all of the benefits. We've got to switch the problem upside down and really think about, you know, not just looking at cost, but really looking at those benefits. And I think that as we identify those benefits, create tracking and valuation for those benefits, that you'll see investment in commercial projects.
Great, thank you, Laura. I think we've gone through around. There are plenty of questions that we didn't answer. I would like to apologize for all those who came in and asked all these very interesting questions. We'll be in charge. So thanks to each one of you panelists for a great contribution. I think we've shed some light on what is a very fast-moving target, highly promising. I'm sure we'll need more of those sessions, Luc. And I'll hand it over to you to say maybe a few words to our participants.
Well, yeah, thank you, particularly Thierry, obviously, for leading that discussion. And I think we can all agree that was an excellent presentation. And also thanks to the rest of the panelists. It's brilliant to get a global panel talking about this, keeping everyone informed. So many angles that we could have gone down with this discussion. So it's brilliant that we touched upon a number of the key ones. You're right, Thierry, we do want to continue talking about green hydrogen, and we've got plans ahead for that. So everyone, do stay subscribed. For this particular session, we will be sending across the recordings within the next week. Thank you all and enjoy the rest of your days or evenings wherever we are in the world. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.